Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing Tenet. So Tenet is the newest film that is written and directed by Christopher Nolan. This was actually my first experience back in theaters since everything kind of shut down in March. I had to see this movie in IMAX. I was willing to venture out and do it. And I have to say, if you're someone who's comfortable with going back to the movies, I would say to witness this in IMAX. It's definitely a spectacle. It's something worth checking out if you are willing to go out there and make the trip into the theaters. First, I have to say, I don't think I can really do the plot of this film justice. So I'll just say this movie is about a protagonist who's like a CIA agent, and he's being thrown into this mission that involves inversion technology. He has to deal with time and changing. It's a lot of complex things going on physically in the film, and it's just basically about trying to save the world. At the end of the day, it's a guy dealing with some unknown, mysterious technology trying to save the world. As far as the technical aspects of the film, you always know when you're going to get a Christopher Nolan film that it's going to be made really well, regardless of how the story's written or how the characters are developed. It's going to be a well-crafted film, and I think this is definitely no exception to that. There are some huge, ridiculous action set pieces in this movie that really stand out. Really original concepts that go along with the fighting when you have the inversions happening with time. People fighting, flipping backwards, things moving forwards, backwards. It's very interesting how it all plays out on the screen. And seeing it on a big, huge IMAX screen makes it that much better. Also, the sound editing is very booming. It's visceral. It's intense. Right off the bat, you have a very well done opera scene. You have also a scene dealing with an airport and an airplane that I thought was really well done and really big and impressive. This movie is huge in its scope. Especially, there's a big major climax towards the end of the film. And just there's a lot going on, a lot of craziness that's happening. And while there is a lot of action in this movie, it is very dialogue heavy at times. And some of the dialogue, in my opinion, is a little bit clunky. You do get some charming moments, particularly with the protagonist character, played by John David Washington, and his relationship with his partner, played by Robert Pattinson. I think those were some of the best human moments in the film. Elizabeth Debicki, who plays the estranged wife of the villain in the film, also has quite a character arc, in my opinion. I think from the beginning of the movie to the end, you really get to see some growth with her and some really, really impactful moments dealing with her and her family. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot of depth going on with the characters. This is a common criticism. With Dunkirk, we saw the same thing, where it's kind of the idea of the movie, the scope of the movie is what's supposed to be the draw, and the characters are kind of secondary to that. But in this movie, I don't feel like it overcomes the issues with the characters in the writing as much as it does in Dunkirk, in my opinion. I do think the movie is fairly well written when it comes to the concepts. It goes on to try to explain a few times with a couple of scenes of exposition, but it is hard to follow. And I have to say, to be honest with you, I think I really only understood about 75 to 80% of the film, and I did enjoy it. The movie started to really pick up for me once I started to understand the things that were happening, trying to put together the pieces, kind of how all the threads of this film come together. It does that in a really satisfying way by the end of the movie, but for the first hour, hour and a half, you're really just struggling to understand what's happening with all this inversion technology and everything involving being inverted, because you think you understand it, and then it kind of adds a new fold to it, and then you're trying to understand that, and someone's explaining it, and you think you know it, and then there's a paradoxes involved, and it gets really complex really quickly, and in my opinion, it gets unnecessarily confusing. Not over the top, just you can't understand it like some film like Mother or something like that, where you really need like spark notes to understand it. It definitely does benefit from probably seeing the film a few times, seeing other people's perspectives of the film, but in a way that does hamper the entertainment value, particularly for me, for the first hour and a half of the movie until you really start to understand what's happening. The movie really is written in a way that it is a mystery that you're unfolding with the protagonist, and you're along on this journey with him, and I did enjoy that. I do like that things are slowly being unmasked for me, and I feel like I would definitely benefit from watching this movie again, knowing where it's going, how it's working, because in the very beginning, things are just happening. There's a lot of strange things. It's cut very quickly. You're jumping from one thing to another. You don't understand why people are talking the way they are, how they're doing what they're doing. But by the end, I could think back on it and reflect on it, and it kind of does come full circle. Some of those earlier moments become far more important by the end of the film. And when you start to see these things, you start to see the little clues, you start to understand how this inversion stuff's working, how this time travel is working, it becomes far more enjoyable. One of my biggest knocks of the film, other than the overall confusion that you kind of have for the first half of the movie, is the villain. I feel like his motivations are a little weak. He's kind of just a really bad guy, a really selfish guy who just wants to have everything and no one else can have anything. And you don't really, you get into some of his backstory, and he does have a little bit of complexity to him, but he's very shallow, in my opinion. There's not a lot below the surface. I was far more interested in the lore of how these things are happening, where it's coming from. You get some glimpses into that, but I almost would have wanted a little bit more. It creates an interesting world. You're very interested in why these things are happening, how they're created, who made these things. but you never really fully get that. You get some clues to it. You get a couple of scenes of exposition that jump through it very, very quickly. Honestly, would probably enjoy a novelization of this film, being able to sit there and read through the dialogue and get some more backstory and understand a little bit more. And I probably will eventually pick it up. And I would love to see this movie again. I might not see it in theaters, but I would love to be able to see it actually probably with subtitles, because there's a lot of minutia to it that would be nice to dive into. But upon a first viewing, and for probably a lot of people, it's a little overwhelming. And at times that overwhelmingness of the story hampers you being able to actually enjoy what you're watching. The overall spectacle of the film does make up for that in many, many ways. I do think it's an excellently crafted film, like I said. The set pieces, the score, everything comes together to make just a really great experience in a big theater. Seeing, especially the first movie, me going back, the sounds, everything about it just immerses you in this world, and it moves pretty quickly, in my opinion. For being 2.5 hours long, it didn't feel that long, and especially with the really good action scenes that are in it. Some of the best action scenes, in my opinion, in some of Nolan's filmography. So if I were to rate this movie, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Definitely a really well-made film. There's a lot of great things to take away from it. It is slightly hampered, in my opinion, by the confusing nature of it. It's unnecessarily confusing. If I'm going to be 100% honest with you, I would be lying to say I fully understand everything. And maybe that's on me. Maybe you go into it and you get it right off the bat. You understand it. You're on board with it. But it took me a little longer than I would like to understand what's happening. And then things even got a little more complex for me towards the end. I thought I knew the rules of what were happening, but I didn't know the rules of what were happening. There's particularly parts to deal with inverted munitions, and I don't really understand how that works. I'm seeing it happen. And that's one of the things is like, it's explained to me, and I think I'm kind of understanding it as it's explained to me, and then I visually see it happening, and I'm confused, and I'm trying to think back to what they said, and that takes away a little bit for me. So I think upon a second viewing, that would be a better experience. So if you checked out Tenet, let me know what you thought about it. Did you understand it? Did you enjoy it? I feel like it's a movie that's going to be a little bit divisive, because if you are a huge Nolan fan and you really are on board with it and you really just dive into it and you just sink your teeth into this movie and you commit to it, you can really enjoy it. But if you go into it in a more casual nature, expecting something that you can just sit back and enjoy, you can get that, because there's some amazing cinematography, some amazing action set pieces. All of that is really there for you. But the story, it just has this barrier of being able to enjoy it at first, unless you can just kind of roll with it. So again, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.